Who should we call the nurse? Asked the single mom waitress, whispered Italian Mafia boss. The rain wasn't just falling, it was attacking. It hammered the emergency room windows at 2:13 in the morning, a frantic drumbeat against the glass of St. Adela Community Hospital. My name is Sydney Lopez. I'm a night shift waitress, a single mother to a 7-year-old named Nova, and I usually spend this hour wiping down vinyl booths and counting tips at the Anchor and Ash Diner. Tonight, I was clutching my left forearm, trying to keep the blood from seeping through the cheap kitchen towels I'd grabbed from the diner's line. The fabric was already soaked, dark red against the bleached white. The fight hadn't been a fight. It had been an education. A swift, brutal lesson in what happens when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time in Harrowport, Pennsylvania. A nurse, her face pale and strained under the buzzing fluorescent lights, looked at the gash and then at my diner uniform. The name tag was pinned crookedly. "We need to stitch this, honey, and we need a contact. Who should we call?" Her pen hovered over the clipboard. My throat closed. I could give her my neighbor's number. But what was Maria going to do? Bring Nova here, into this. The name came out before I could stop it. Barely a puff of air, but it felt deafening in the sterile room. The Italian Mafia boss. The nurse blinked. She thought I was delirious, maybe hit my head. "Excuse me." I didn't repeat it. I didn't need to. I wasn't calling him because I knew him. Not really. I was calling him because I knew the man who did this to me. He was a soldier for Sable Meridian, the digital money laundering outfit that was choking Harrowport, turning our quiet Pennsylvania streets into a transaction hub for ghosts. The name I wanted, the number I had memorized from a business card left instead of a tip 3 weeks ago, was Raphael Conti. In Leeward Point, they called him the Dock King. He ran the commercial shipping unions, the cold storage, and everything that moved on the water. He was Sable Meridian's oldest, deepest rival. I'd only ever served him coffee, black, 2 sugars. He came into the Anchor and Ash maybe twice a month, always late, always alone. He paid in cash, crisp bills that felt different from the crumpled ones left by the truckers. His eyes, they were the sharpest things I'd ever seen, the color of old steel. And he was always polite, suspiciously polite, the kind of polite that means you are never allowed to make a mistake in his presence. I wasn't just a waitress who got caught in a brawl. When the man had grabbed me by the counter, I'd stumbled. When I fell, my hand had brushed his jacket pocket. I felt it, a small, hard rectangle. A cold storage wallet. In the chaos of the fry cook hitting the panic button, the attacker had focused on the cook, not me. I'd seen the wallet slide free, skittering under the prep fridge. I grabbed it. I had glanced at it in the alley, shielding it from the rain. It was already open. He'd been checking it. I saw the ledger. Transactions, names. A Pennsylvania state senator and an investigator, a lead detective from the MOCB, the Mid-Atlantic Organized Crime Bureau. I knew what I had. It was a map of the rot. The nurse was tapping her pen. "Ma'am, a family member?" "No cops," I whispered, louder this time. Calling the Harrowport PD would be signing my own death certificate, and Nova's too. Sable Meridian owned half the badges in this town, and the ones they didn't own, they scared the feds. The National Witness Security Division, the NWSD, was just pretty lettering on a government brochure. In the real world, leaks moved faster than electricity. I had one chance. One shield big enough to stand behind, a rival king. I pulled out my cheap phone, my fingers slipping on the screen from the rain or the blood. I wasn't sure. I dialed the number. It rang 3 times. A voice answered, smooth and deep, heavy with an Italian accent that wasn't for show. "Conte." I was at the Anchor and Ash. I rushed out, my voice shaking. "A man. He works for Sable Meridian. He attacked me. I'm at St. Adela." Silence. Then his voice dropped, losing its calm, gaining a cold intensity. "What did you see?" "A ledger on a drive. It has MOCB names on it. I have it." Another pause, shorter. "Who touched? You." I told him the name. I didn't hear him hang up. The line just went dead. Maybe 10 minutes passed. The nurse had given up on the contact information and was cleaning my arm with iodine that stung like fire. Then, I heard it. Not sirens, the sound of heavy, expensive tires displacing water, arriving too fast and stopping too perfectly outside the ambulance bay. The automatic doors slid open, and the sterile smell of the ER was suddenly cut by something else. A scent of warm woods, bergamot, and expensive wool. 3 men entered. They wore bespoke suits that probably cost more than my car, but they didn't look like lawyers. They stood like bodyguards, their shoulders blocking the doorway, scanning the room in a single, practiced sweep. The man in the middle was Raffaele Conte. He looked at the blood-soaked towels, then at the nurse, then at me. His steel eyes missed nothing. He walked directly to my cubicle. Ignoring the triage desk, the nurse instinctively stepped back. He looked at the gash on my arm, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. His gaze lifted to mine. "From now on, you do not sign anything," he said, his voice low and absolute. "You do not speak to anyone. And if you want to live, Sydney, you come with me, right now." He knew my name. Of course he knew my name. I tasted copper. My head was spinning, but one thought cut through the fog. Nova. "I'll go," I said, my voice cracking. "I'll go. But my daughter, Nova, she's with my neighbor. She has to be safe first, before anything." Raffaele Conte looked at me for a long second, as if measuring my resolve. He gave a single, sharp nod to the man on his left. The man immediately turned, already on his phone before he had cleared the doorway. "She will be," Raffaele said. It wasn't a promise. It was a statement of fact. He held out his hand. I didn't take it. I slid off the gurney, my knees weak. The young nurse who had asked me the question was standing by the curtain, clipboard clutched to her chest, her eyes wide with a terror that I recognized. It was the terror of seeing the real machinery that runs the world, right there behind the curtain. I reached into my jeans pocket, my hand clumsy, and pulled out the cash I had made tonight. It was just over $100. I dropped the crumpled bills onto the metal tray by the bed, a tip for the silence. Raffaele watched me do it, his expression unreadable. I pulled the thin curtain closed behind me, leaving the blood, the diner uniform, and the entire life I thought I knew on the other side. I walked out of St. Adela Hospital and into the rain, following the scent of power and warm cologne into the dark. The chain of events had been started. There was no going back. We didn't use the main entrance. Raffaele guided me with a hand that hovered an inch from the small of my back, a gesture of invisible pressure, steering me away from the triage desks. We slipped past the ambulance bay through a set of rattling metal double doors marked "Deliveries Only." The cold, wet air hit me immediately, a shock after the overheated hospital. The rain was still relentless. A car was waiting, pulled up onto the concrete loading dock, its engine a low, resonant hum that was felt more than heard. It wasn't a sleek limousine or a flashy sedan. It was a black fortress on wheels, massive and featureless, reflecting the yellow dock lights like wet obsidian. An Alba Motors Centurion. I'd never even heard of the brand. One of his men, the one who had disappeared to find Nova, was already there. He opened the heavy rear door, and it moved with the silent, weighted precision of a bank vault. The interior was cavernous, smelling of rich leather and the same warm, woody cologne Raffaele wore. It was utterly silent, the sound of the rain vanishing the second the door sealed shut. The car moved through Harrowport's sleeping streets, the sodium vapor lamps dragging orange streaks across the thick, armored glass. We crossed the Halcyon Bridge, leaving the downtown grid behind, and descended into Leeward Point. This was Conte's kingdom. The landscape changed instantly. The convenience stores and bail bond offices gave way to massive, red brick warehouses, their sides painted with faded shipping logos from the 1940s. Skeletal cranes stood silent watch against the gray. Pre-dawn sky, their hooks dripping rain. This wasn't just Mafia territory, It was industrial. His power wasn't just built on fear, it was built on logistics, on unions, on the silent movement of goods. A large, professionally made sign read, Leeward Commercial Port Alliance, a legitimate front. I realized, the best kind. The Centurion bypassed the street-level entrances, climbing a private ramp that led beneath a towering spike of glass and steel that pierced the skyline. Casa Vetro, the glass house. The private elevator opened directly into the penthouse. It wasn't an apartment, it was an observation deck. 3 of the 4 walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, showcasing a 180-degree panorama of the Delance River, the water a churning sheet of black, dotted with the lights of the distant opposite shore. A man I hadn't seen before was waiting. He was older, with silver hair, carrying a professional medical bag. "He will stitch your arm," Raffaele said. It was not a request. I sat on a leather sofa that probably cost more than my car, and the doctor began working, his touch clinical and efficient. Raffaele stood by the window, a dark silhouette against his city. "The terms?" he said, his voice quiet but filling the vast room. He didn't turn around. "You are now a complication. My complication." He faced me, his steel-gray eyes pinning me in place. "You keep your apartment. You keep your job at the diner. Nova stays with you. But your life, as you knew it, is over. You will have a new security schedule. A car, not yours, will be waiting for you at 5:45 every evening. And this." He gestured to my cheap phone, which one of his men had placed on the granite countertop. "You will tap the screen 3 times if you are in danger. 3 taps, not 4, not 2. That is the signal. Do you understand?" I nodded, wincing as the needle pulled the skin of my forearm tight. My throat was dry. "I need my daughter. You said she would be safe." She is on her way." As if summoned by his words, the elevator chimed softly. The doors slid open. The man who had been at the hospital walked in, carrying Nova. My heart stopped. She was fast asleep, her face peaceful, her cheek resting on his dark suit jacket. She was still clutching Barnaby, her one-eyed stuffed rabbit. My breath caught in my throat, a painful knot of relief and terror. "Put her on the sofa," Raffaele ordered, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. The man gently laid her down on the far end of the massive couch. "The drive," Raffaele said, turning his attention back to me. My hand went to the pocket of my blood-stained diner uniform. It was still there, a small, hard rectangle. I pulled it out. It looked so insignificant, this little piece of metal that had torn my life apart. I held it out to him. He didn't take it. He gestured to the doctor, who paused his stitching, stripped off his gloves, and produced a sterile, clear evidence bag. I dropped the cold wallet inside. Raffaele picked up the sealed bag, holding it up to the light. He looked at the drive. Then he looked back at me. The way he looked at me had changed. In the diner, I was the help. In the ER, I was a victim he was collecting. Now, seeing the drive, I was something else. I wasn't just baggage he had to protect. I was a key. I was leverage. "Sable Meridian," he said, his voice laced with a cold disgust that felt deeply personal. "They are not old world. They are a postmodern cartel. They don't move bricks of cocaine. They move ghost NFTs and wash digital currency through online casinos. Their servers are hosted on Crown Rock." Crown Rock, a tax haven island off the coast I'd only heard of in commercials for shady online investments. "Their leader," he continued, "is Ari Sable, a man who wears turtlenecks in the summer and smiles without ever using his eyes." He set the drive down on the counter. The MOCB recently launched Project Cinder to investigate organized crime in the shipping lanes, a waste of taxpayer money meant to look good in the papers. "The man on the drive," I said, my voice hoarse. "Investigator Kellen Dorr. He's listed as a beneficiary, a lot of transactions." Raffaele's eyes narrowed. "Dorr. He's the one running Project Cinder. He's investigating me, using Sable's money to fund the operation. They are not just corrupt, they are ambitious." Seeing Nova, safe for this single moment, crystallized my fear into a hard, sharp anger. She can't stay here. She can't stay in Harrowport, not while they're looking for this drive, looking for me. You have to get her out. Send her to the Lighthouse Elementary School, near my aunt's old place. Give her a new name, a temporary identity, anything. Rafaela shook his head. The refusal was instant and absolute. No. What do you mean, no? I stood up, pulling my arm away from the doctor, who had just finished the bandage. I'm telling you what I need for my daughter's safety. He took a step closer. The sheer size of him, the coiled energy was overwhelming. You think they are fools? A new girl at a school? A new name? They will find her in a day. They are looking for someone who ran. True safety. Sydney is not in running. It is in being close, right under their noses. It is in being unpredictable. That's not safety. My voice was rising, sharp with panic. That's using her as bait. I won't let you. I won't. You won't let me. His voice dropped, becoming dangerously quiet, more threatening than any shout. You called me. You brought this problem to my door. You and your daughter are now under my protection, and that means you will follow my rules. I am her mother. I make the rules for her, I shot back, though I was trembling. You are a waitress who just got her arm split open, he countered, his words like cold steel. You are in a world you do not understand. I do, so you will be quiet, and you will listen. The air crackled. I hated this. I hated being managed, being ordered, being trapped in another powerful man's orbit. I had spent years getting free of Nova's father, Trey, just to land here, and Rafael Conte. I could tell. Despised disobedience. He was a king in his castle, a man whose word was law. We stared at each other, two wills colliding in the silent, glass-walled room. It was the first real spark, hot and sharp, and it had nothing to do with attraction. It was about control. The tension was broken by a small sound, Nova. She stirred on the massive leather sofa, murmuring in her sleep as she searched for her rabbit. We both looked, the fight drained out of me, replaced by the familiar, aching pull of motherhood. Raffaele watched Nova for a long moment. The hard, angular lines of his face seemed to soften. Just for a second, he turned, walking over to a nearby armchair where a dark, cashmere throw blanket was neatly folded. He picked it up. I expected him to toss it at me, to order me to cover her. Instead, he walked to the sofa and gently, almost awkwardly, he unfurled the heavy blanket. His large, scarred hands carefully draped it over her small body, tucking it in around her shoulders. It was a gesture of such unexpected, quiet tenderness that it knocked me completely off balance. He straightened up, his back to me, and returned to his vigil at the window. I stared at his silhouette, my heart doing a strange, confused flip. How could a monster, a man who commanded this much fear, know how to be gentle? We didn't stay at the penthouse. Before sunrise, I was back in my own apartment, the new bandage tight on my arm, the cheap kitchen towels gone, the Centurion's tire tracks washed away by the rain. The only proof it had happened was the lingering scent of bergamot on my clothes and a tiny, almost invisible burn mark on my phone where they had modified the charging port. 3 taps. That morning, I walked Nova to school. It was the hardest normal thing I had ever done. Every car that slowed, every person walking their dog, every shadow in an alley seemed to be watching. As we approached the front gate of the elementary school, I saw them. 2 men in blue work uniforms, standing by an open utility panel on the wall, fiddling with the bell system. They looked bored, authentic, but I recognized the one on the left. He had been one of the bodyguards in the ER, Conti Holdings. They were disguised as technicians. They didn't look at me, but I felt their presence, a perimeter being drawn around my daughter. I kissed Nova goodbye, my stomach churning. Be good, little bird. I'll see you at 3. I love you, Mommy. I love you more. I watched her run inside until the bell rang. Then I turned and walked away, my legs feeling like lead. Rafaela had given me a new phone, identical to my old one, but heavier. Keep your old one, he'd said. They will expect it. Use this one only for me. The next few days were a blur of paranoia. I went to work at the Anchor and Ash, serving coffee and cleaning up spilled ketchup, my every move feeling staged. But I was also learning. Rafaela didn't just give me bodyguards, he gave me rules, a new education. You look at reflections, his voice had instructed over the secure line, the connection so clear it sounded like he was standing next to me. The glass of the bus stop, the side mirror of a parked car. You don't look at the person following you. You watch their shadow. You watch their reflection. You read the tale. Is it a rental? Does it have fleet plates? You look at traffic cameras. You learn their blind spots. It was a survival course taught in clipped, precise sentences. I learned to spot the difference between a curious glance and a professional observation. I learned how to move through a crowd, how to use the flow of people as a shield. I was no longer just a waitress. I was becoming something else. And in the quiet moments, when I was alone in my apartment, the man who had done this to me haunted my thoughts. Trey Mullen, my ex, the man who told me he loved me, right up until the day he vanished with 2 months' rent money, leaving me pregnant and facing eviction. He was the reason I was a single mother. He was the reason I had to fight for every dollar. And now, he was back. He wasn't just a deadbeat anymore. He was a foot soldier for Sable Meridian. The hand that had once held mine was the same one that had grabbed my arm, the same one that had left the gash. The betrayal had come full circle. Last night wasn't just an attack, it was a ghost from my past trying to bury me. That evening, I was summoned back to the penthouse. This time, there was no doctor, no sleeping child, just Rafaela, standing before a massive digital display that showed a map of Harrowport. It was covered in red icons. "This is our problem," he said, gesturing to the screen. "Your diner, the Anchor and Ash. It is watched. They know you work there." He pointed to a spot on the water. Dock 7, one of my own shipping terminals, also compromised. And this. His finger tapped a bright red circle downtown. "The Eclipse Parlor. It's a high-stakes gambling club. Invitation only." "What is it?" I asked. "It is Ari Sable's bank," he replied. "It's one of the main physical locations where they process the digital cash from Crown Rock. The diner and my dock are all being monitored by the same surveillance teams, by Kellen Door's people, funded by Sable." I stared at the map, at the web connecting my job, his business, and their criminal enterprise. "So what am I?" I asked, my voice flat. "You're protecting me, but you're sending me back to the diner. You're teaching me how to spot a tail. Am I bait?" He turned to face me. His expression was unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his steel gray eyes. Surprise? He was surprised I wasn't afraid. "I am afraid," I said, answering his unspoken question. I was terrified. My hands were shaking, but I clenched them into fists. "I'm not stupid, but my daughter needs me. And if I'm going to be a piece in your game, I will not be a blind one. So, you tell me, am I bait?" He held my gaze. "You are not bait. You are a witness, but they don't know what you saw. They only know you were there." Trey Mullen reported the fight, but he did not report the missing drive. He's likely too afraid to admit he lost it. They are watching you to see what you do. Before I could answer, my old phone, the one I kept in my apron, buzzed on the counter, a text message from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo. My blood ran cold. It was Nova. She was standing outside the school gate just that morning. She was looking at the technicians by the wall. The angle was from across the street. The message underneath was simple. "Lopez, don't play with fire." I dropped the phone. The room tilted. They had been there. They had watched her. Rafaela was by my side in an instant. He picked up the phone, his eyes scanning the image. The calm, controlled mask vanished. A silent, cold fury radiated from him, so intense it was almost a physical force. His jaw was granite. "They breached the perimeter," he whispered, his voice a low growl. "They were across the street, and my men never saw them." He turned. Not to me, but to the glass wall, looking down at his city. There is a leak, an inside man. Someone in the Port Alliance is feeding them information. My information. He turned back to me, his eyes dark. Your apartment is no longer safe. The school is no longer safe. You said running was predictable, I said, my voice trembling but hard. It is, which is why we will do the opposite of running. We will move you closer. What does that mean? The deal has changed, he said. I need to know who the mole is, and I need to get inside the Eclipse parlor. You are my way in. They are watching you. They expect you to be a scared waitress. Trey Mullen knows you. He will be there. You want me to walk in there after they just threatened my daughter? I want you to get a job there, and he countered. As a waitress, you will wear a microphone, a simple dot, you will serve drinks, and you will listen. You will get close to Trey. He is the weak link. I thought of Nova, of that picture, of the life I was trying to build, and in return, I will move Nova tonight to the Kite District. It is a secure apartment building I own, registered to the Lucia Conte Charitable Fund. It has its own security, its own staff. It is off the grid. She will be safer there than anywhere else in this state. The Lucia Conte Charitable Fund, his mother's name. I'd heard the legitimate, clean side of his empire, a fortress built on charity. This was the gray morality. He was offering my daughter sanctuary in a castle built with blood money, and he was asking me to walk into the fire to pay for it. She goes there tonight, I said. I want to see it, and I want your word. You have it. I took a deep breath, the smell of his cologne, the sterile air of the penthouse, all of it feeling like a cage. I walked up to him, close enough to see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. I spoke quietly, so quietly that the rain against the glass was almost louder. One more thing. If this goes wrong, if you betray me, if you decide I'm not worth the trouble and you make a deal with them, I don't care what happens to me, but you leave her out of it, you let her go, you send her to my aunt, you swear to me, Conte. Raffaella Conti, the dock king of Leeward Point, looked at me, a single mother from a diner who'd just given him an ultimatum. He didn't flinch, he just watched me, the silence stretching. Then he gave a single, slow nod. His eyes darkened, as if he was swallowing the vow, letting it settle deep inside him. You have my word, he said. The Eclipse parlor was a world without daylight. It operated in a perpetual, smoky twilight bathed in the violet glow of black lights. The air smelled of expensive whiskey, stale smoke, and a faint, sharp tang of ozone from the rows of glowing slot machines. The roulette wheels spun with a hypnotic, clicking whisper. I navigated the floor. My tray balanced on one hand, a short black skirt and tight-fitting logo polo replacing my comfortable diner uniform. The dot microphone was a tiny, cold speck taped just below my collarbone. I passed the threshold to the silver VIP lounge, a room shielded by a one-way mirror, the guard, a mountain in a tight tuxedo, nodded me through. This was my third night. I was part of the furniture now. And then I saw him. Trey Mullen was leaning against the private bar, wearing a black bomber jacket, his sleeves pushed up to show the faded, blurred compass tattoo on his forearm. The needle was permanently stuck, pointing northwest, a permanent monument to his bad decisions. He watched me approach, his eyes dead. He waited until I was close, setting down a glass, and then he deliberately shouldered me, hard. The glasses on my tray rattled. Watch it, I snapped, the old familiar anger flaring. He leaned in, his voice a low growl, his breath hot and sour with beer. You're stupid, Sid. Real stupid. Ari wants the drive. He knows you were there. My blood froze. Then, just as quickly, I realized the lie. Oh, he didn't know I had it. He was fishing. He thought I was just a witness. A loose end he needed to scare into silence. He had no idea what he had lost. I kept my face blank, gathered my tray, and walked away without a word, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had a window of exactly 4 minutes. Above me, hidden in the complex metal rigging that held the spotlights, Raphael's team was in place. I had seen the schematics. They were deploying a high-gain SDR antenna, aimed directly at the accounts office on the other side of the wall. They weren't breaking into the safe. They were waiting for the safe's internal cold wallet relay to ping the network. And they were going to snatch the transaction data right out of the air. But they needed a booster. They needed my beacon, planted inside the room. I turned the corner, out of sight of the main floor, and headed for the employees-only door. I didn't fake a cough. I palmed my stomach, hunched over, and shoved my way into the empty back room, making a retching sound. It was an office. Cheap metal desk, flickering monitor, and in the corner, the safe, a steel box the size of a small refrigerator. My hands were slick with cold sweat. I fumbled in the waistband of my skirt, my fingers closing around the beacon. It was a thin, black disc, no bigger than a quarter. Footsteps! Someone was coming! My heart wasn't just pounding, it was trying to escape my chest. 3, 2, 1, I dropped to my knees, pretending to be sick again, and with my other hand, I slapped the magnetic beacon onto the metal underside of the desk. As close to the safe's data port as I could get, I heard the faint click as the magnets caught. The door opened. It was just another waitress. "You okay, honey?" she asked, bored. "Fine," I gasped, wiping my mouth with a napkin. "Just fine." I got to my feet, my legs shaking, and walked back out onto the floor. I had been gone for maybe 60 seconds. I had just placed a new tray on my shoulder when the alarm went off. It wasn't the loud, clanging bell of a real fire. It was a high-pitched, electronic shriek. Simultaneously, a fine mist began to spray from the ceiling. Not water, which would ruin the electronics, but some kind of pressurized fog, already clinging to the black lights, turning the room into a chaotic swirl of purple smoke. People yelled, chairs scraped, the music died. And then the front doors burst open. MOCB, nobody move, hands in the air. Kellen Dorr, and he was in the lead. Tactical vest on, his face set in a mask of professional severity. But his eyes were wrong. He wasn't scanning, he was looking for specific targets. His team, moving with practiced efficiency, bypassed the high rollers and Trey's men at the bar. Instead, they swarmed 2 men I'd never seen before, 2 men sitting quietly at a blackjack table, and slammed them to the ground. I saw it, a flash of movement, door, while shouting orders, made eye contact with one of Sable's tuxedoed guards, and gave him a single, sharp nod, a confirmation. He was arresting decoys. He was arresting Rafaela's men, planted here to be arrested, to confirm the betrayal. The fire alarm had been Rafaela's signal. The MOCB raid was the proof. Chaos was my cover. I dropped my tray and ran, not for the front door, but for the service corridor I'd memorized from the blueprints. I pushed through the kitchen doors, past stunned chefs, and into the narrow hallway that led to the loading dock. A hand grabbed me from behind, spinning me around and slamming me against the cinder block wall. The impact knocked the breath from my lungs. Trey. His face was inches from mine, twisted in a mask of pure panic and rage. "Where is it? Where is the drive, Sydney?" He wasn't fishing anymore. He knew. He grabbed my left wrist, the one that was still bruised and stitched from his last attack, and squeezed. A white-hot bolt of pain shot up my arm. "You ruined everything," he spat. "She does not belong to you." The voice was ice. It cut through the panic, through the pain. Rafaela Conti stepped out of the shadows of the loading dock entrance. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was dressed in dark utility pants and a black Henley, and he moved with a silence that was terrifying. Trey's eyes widened. He let go of my wrist and fumbled inside his bomber jacket, pulling out a cheap switchblade. The blade snapped open, catching the red glow of the exit sign. Rafaela didn't even look at the knife. He looked at Trey's eyes. "A mistake," he said calmly. Trey lunged. It was over before I could blink. Rafaela didn't dodge. He moved inside the lunge, his hand a blur. He was holding a pen, a thick, metal-bodied pen. He struck Trey's wrist with a short, brutal chop. There was a wet, sickening crack. The knife clattered to the concrete floor. Trey screamed, clutching his hand, his arm useless. In that single, frozen moment, as Trey reeled back, my training took over. My hand shot out, not to hurt him, but to his belt. I ripped the plastic access card for the building from its clip. "Now, Sydney," Rafaela commanded. He grabbed my good hand, pulling me past Trey, who was sliding down the wall in agony. Two of Rafael's men appeared from the loading dock, materializing from the darkness. They formed a wedge around us as we burst out into the night air. Behind us, I heard shouts and the pounding of boots, Doors men. The real sirens were closing in now, a cacophony of sound. We didn't run for the street, we ran for the water. We sprinted down the length of the pier, the cold wind off the Delance River hitting my face. At the end of the pier, a tugboat, one of the old lighthouse tenders, was churning water, its engines rumbling. It wasn't docked, it was moving slowly, parallel to the pier. "Go!" Rafaela yelled. His men vaulted the gap, landing easily on the deck. Rafael pushed me. "Jump!" I leaped, scrambling over the railing, landing hard on the steel deck. Rafaela was right behind me, his landing silent, as the boat's powerful engines engaged, accelerating us into the dark channel. Its horn let out a deep, mournful blast. I looked back at the flashing red and blue lights of the Eclipse parlor. I saw the silhouette of Kellen Dorr on the pier, watching us go. I had the key card. They had the data. And I had just destroyed my entire life, the one I knew, the one I hated, the one that was, until tonight, mine. I had just saved myself by burning the last bridge to my past. The Kite District was not a place, but a concept. The apartment was on the 27th floor of a sleek, anonymous glass tower that scraped the Harrow Port sky. It was technically a safe house, but it felt more like a sterile, high-end hotel suite. The windows were massive, and through them, the rain looked like a silent, gray curtain drawn across the city. Nova was sitting at a glass dining table, drawing. She'd been quiet ever since the exploration began. "Mommy, why did we change schools?" she asked, her small voice serious, her crayon hovering over the paper. She was drawing seagulls, dozens of them soaring over a blue scribble of water. I liked my old school and my old bed. The guilt twisted in my stomach, sharp and familiar. I knelt beside her, smoothing her hair. "I know, little bird, it is a special adventure, like being spies. We are just exploring a new part of the city for a few days." "Oh," she said, clearly unconvinced, and returned to her drawing. "Okay, an adventure." I left her and walked into the kitchen. The appliances were all stainless steel, gleaming, and looked as if they had never been touched, but they were being used. Rafaela Conti was standing at the induction stove, his heavy suit jacket gone, his crisp white shirt sleeves rolled meticulously to his forearms. He was stirring a large pot, the motion methodical. Practiced, a cloud of steam rose, and the sterile apartment was filled with the rich, warm scent of garlic, tomatoes, and fresh basil. He turned as I approached. He looked utterly out of place, a creature of shadow and steel standing in a bright, modern kitchen holding a wooden spoon. A tired, involuntary smile touched my lips. "What?" he asked. His voice was neutral, but his eyes were watching me closely. "I just didn't expect this," I admitted, gesturing with my chin toward the stove. "The Dock King of Leeward Point. He knows how to use a blender." A flicker of something not quite a smile, but a softening passed over his mouth. "My mother taught me," he said, his voice quiet. He turned back to the soup. "She said a man who cannot feed himself is just a boy in a suit, not a man." He took 2 heavy ceramic bowls from a cabinet and ladled the thick, red soup. "Tomato basil. Eat. You need it." We sat at the wide granite counter, the silence heavy but not entirely uncomfortable. The only sounds were the faint hiss of the rain against the glass and Nova's quiet humming from the dining table. The soup was hot and real, and I realized I hadn't eaten in almost a day. "Why the docks?" I asked, breaking the silence. "You're smart. You could have done anything. Why that life?" He stared into his bowl for a moment, then looked past me, out the window at the gray, churning ribbon of the Delancey River far below. This city doesn't give you choices. Sydney, it takes them. When I was a boy, my father worked the docks. He was a longshoreman, a good one. Honest. He paused, and his grip tightened on his spoon. A crane hoist failed. Bad maintenance. A frayed cable the company knew about. The cable snapped. He stopped, and I watched his throat work as he swallowed. A container. It crushed him. He died on Pier 9. I closed my eyes. The shipping company, he continued, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion, ruled it operator error. They paid no compensation. No pension. My mother was left with nothing. I started working on those same docks when I was 16. But I didn't just learn the hoists. I learned the contracts. I learned the schedules. I learned who owed who and who was skimming. I built my empire with paper before I ever had to use my fists. I built it so that I could guarantee that the families, my families, would never be left with nothing again. I looked at this man who had built a kingdom from grief and vengeance. And now all this, the Port Alliance, the Lucia Fund, how much of it are you really planning to make legitimate? He met my gaze directly. There was no lie in his eyes, no hesitation, 100%. I must have looked surprised. I am serious, Sut, he said. The goal is 18 months. The Lucia Conte Fund is already clean. It is a fully audited charitable foundation. We are investing in automated shipping, green port infrastructure. That is the future. But I cannot transfer the assets. I cannot complete the transition. While Sable Meridian is choking my supply lines and Kellen Dorr has his boot on my neck. To go clean, he said, his voice dropping. I must first win this war. I must cut the rot out of my city. He stood up, wiping his mouth with a napkin. The moment of vulnerability over. He retrieved his jacket from the back of a chair and took a small, black velvet box from the pocket. This is for Nova. I took it. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a small, silver pin. It was a seagull, its wings spread wide, just like the ones Nova was drawing. It was beautiful, delicately made. Rafaela, this is lovely, but... It is a tracking device, and he said, all business again. Its signal is linked to my personal security net. It has a 24-hour battery, rechargeable. She is to wear it at all times. No exceptions. My heart sank. A gift that was also a chain. I picked it up. It wasn't just a pin. It was a barrette, a hair clip. It's for her hair. Yes, he said. Easier for a child to wear. She will forget it is there. He stepped closer. The kitchen, which had felt vast, suddenly felt tiny. The air was charged, thick with the smell of his cologne and the heat radiating from his body. It fastened securely, like this. He was standing directly in front of me now, his eyes on my hair, my breath caught in my throat. May I? He asked. His voice was a low request, but it felt like a command. I couldn't find my voice. I just gave a single, jerky nod. His hand, large and scarred, came up. I flinched, expecting a rough touch, but his fingers were surprisingly gentle. He didn't just fasten the clip. He carefully, deliberately, brushed a strand of stray hair back from my temple. His knuckles a feather-light graze against my skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. Then, with that same impossible delicacy, he slid the seagull clip into my hair, just above my ear, securing the lock of hair in place. See, he whispered, his face inches from mine. It holds. I could see the individual flecks of silver and storm blue in his eyes. I could feel his breath. My heart did not just skip a beat. It felt like it had stopped entirely, waiting for his permission to beat again. He wasn't touching me. Not really, but I felt it everywhere. He slowly, almost reluctantly, pulled his hand back. My fingers trembled as I reached up and fumbled with the clip, removing it. I'll put it on her jacket, I stammered, needing to break the spell. He cleared his throat and took a step back, the professional mask slamming back into place. Good. While you were at the eclipse, my team finished analyzing the data. We found the mole. He tapped a tablet on the counter. A document filled the screen. Container manifests, dozens of them from my own docks. The shipping times on these manifests perfectly matched the MOCB patrol schedules. The fake patrol's door was running. Every single manifest was stamped and authorized by the Harrow Port Shoreline Commission. A public office. I breathed, the pieces clicking into place. The leak isn't just one of your men. It's the city government. It's the man who appointed the head of the commission. Rafaela corrected me, his voice hard. State Senator Halcombe. I looked at the tablet, scrolling. My eyes landed on a digital invitation, the senator's smiling, political face beaming from the screen. He's having a fundraiser, I said, reading the text. At the Northmere Maritime Museum. This week, Rafaela nodded. Ari Subble, Kellen Dorr, Senator Halcombe, all three of them will be there. In public, mingling, completely untouchable. Not if they are with me, I said. The words were out of my mouth before I could think. He turned, a new, sharp warning in his eyes. Sydney, this is not the Eclipse Parlor. This is not a back alley fight. This is high-level politics. These men are insulated. I know, I said, a strange, cold courage settling over me. And I am just a waitress. I am the bait they already threatened. I am the one they will ignore. You need someone who can get close enough to Dorr. Someone he will brag to. Someone he will underestimate. I can be that person. He stared at me for a long, heavy minute. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of the wind whipping against the 27th floor windows. You are asking, he said slowly, to walk into the center of the fire. I am already in it, I replied. You put me there. He sighed, a heavy, frustrated sound. He looked at me, then at Nova, still drawing her birds. If anything happens to you at that museum, he said, his voice low and final, I will be the only one responsible for it. I stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes. No, I said, my voice just as quiet but firm. You don't have a monopoly on courage, Rafaela, or responsibility. I am choosing this for my daughter and for me. He nodded, a single, sharp dip of his chin. He walked to the massive sliding glass door and, with one hand, pulled it open. The rain had finally stopped. The air that washed into the sterile room was cold, clean, and smelled of the wet, waking city and the distant dark river. For one single suspended moment, standing there in the quiet, we were just two people breathing in the calm before the storm. The confidence closet in the Kite District safe house had contained exactly one item, a dress. It was a heavy, deep blue satin gown, the color of the ocean at midnight, cut simply but falling in a way that felt less like clothing and more like liquid armor. When I stepped out, Rafaela was waiting by the elevator. He was in a tuxedo. It was not just a suit, it was a shadow, tailored so perfectly that it seemed to absorb the light around him. He looked less like a man attending a party and more like the physical embodiment of the secrets that funded it. His eyes raked over me, a slow, appreciative inventory that was entirely non-verbal, and I felt a strange flush of heat rise in my chest. He offered his arm. The drive to the Northmere Maritime Museum was silent, the tension in the Centurion so thick I could barely breathe. The rain had started again, lashing against the armored glass. As the car slowed, approaching the grand columned entrance, Rafaela put his hand on my arm. His touch was light, but the heat of it burned straight through the satin. The plan is simple, and he said, his voice low, for my ears only. We get the picture. You talk to Dorr, but Sydney. His gaze locked on mine, intense and serious. The second you want out, you tap my wrist 3 times, just like the phone. If you change your mind, if he says something, if you feel unsafe, 3 taps, we leave. No questions asked. I looked into his steel gray eyes. This was not an order. It was an offer. It was a clear, unambiguous escape hatch, given freely. I understand, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. I am not changing my mind. The great hall of the museum was a cavern of polite noise. Laughter and conversation echoed off the high, vaulted ceilings, where the massive, articulated skeleton of a blue whale hung suspended in the air, seeming to float over the glittering crowd. We moved as one, Raphael's hand resting lightly on the small of my back. I was a glass of champagne, a polite smile, the invisible partner of the leeward dock king. And then, across the floor, I saw them. Senator Halcombe, his face a mask of political charm, was clinking glasses with Kellen Dorr. Dorr looked smug, basking in the reflected power, his suit slightly too tight across the shoulders. As we watched, a waiter carrying a silver tray of appetizers moved past them. Pausing just for a second, I saw the faint glint of a camera lens, perfectly disguised among the canapes. A photographer from the Lucia Fund. The picture was taken. Objective 1 was complete. Rafaela gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. It was my turn. I detached myself from his side, letting the crowd swallow me as I drifted toward the buffet table. Then, as if by accident, turned toward Kellen Dorr, who'd been momentarily left alone. "Investigator Dorr," I said, allowing a slight, breathy nervousness to color my voice. "I saw your name in the paper. Project Cinder. It sounds so impressive." He turned, his eyes giving me a quick, dismissive appraisal. Waitress, arm candy, easily impressed. "It is just work," he said, puffing out his chest, enjoying the attention. It must be so fascinating, though all that security, I have always wondered. I motioned with my head toward a quieter, dimly lit side gallery. "I was just looking at these old anchors in there. They are massive." He followed me. It was that simple. He followed me like a fish taking a lure, his ego leading the way. He was arrogant, blinded by the assumption that a woman in a blue dress was just background scenery. We stood in the ancient anchorage exhibit, surrounded by tons of rusted metal that had once held ships against the sea. "The security in this city is the real deal," he boasted, leaning in, his voice dropping conspiratorially. "You cannot get anywhere. Not the ports, not the MOCB database, not without the right access." "Like a special key?" I asked, widening my eyes just enough. "Keys are for amateurs," he scoffed, pleased with himself. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black rectangular fob on a keychain. "Encrypted token, biometric link to my credentials. This," he said, tapping it with a thick finger, "is the key to the entire city." My heart was pounding. I smiled, a slow, dazzling smile, and placed my hand gently on his forearm. "My goodness, you had better not lose that. It was absolutely fascinating meeting you. Investigator." I turned and walked away, not looking back, my legs feeling shaky with the adrenaline. I walked straight toward the main hall. Rafaela was standing in the next doorway, a tall, dark silhouette framed by the arched stone. He had been watching the entire exchange. His expression was not the possessive glare of a jealous man. It was something far more potent. It was trust. He had watched me work, and he had trusted me to handle it. As I passed him, he fell into step beside me. Dorr was already gone, lost back in the crowd. We did not speak. The silent communication was perfect. We moved past the main hall, away from the whale skeleton, toward a different wing. A small, velvet rope was clipped in front of an unlit hallway. A sign read, "Auxiliary Gallery Cartography of the Delance." It was dark, empty. Raphael unclipped the rope, his movements fluid and economical. He pushed the heavy oak door. It opened into darkness. He guided me in with a hand on my back, and the door closed behind us with a heavy, final thud, sealing out the party, the noise, and the world. We were alone. The only sound in the room was the rain, which had intensified, drumming a soft, rhythmic tattoo against the high skylight windows. The air smelled of old wood, floor wax, and the warm, intoxicating scent of his cologne. I turned to face him. My heart was pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. A frantic bird. I was high on the risk, on the success, on him. I took the first step. I reached out, my hand trembling, and took his wrist, the one he had told me to tap. I held it. "Are you sure?" I whispered. My voice was not my own. He did not move, but his gaze was electric, searching my face in the near darkness. "Only if you want this. Sydney," he breathed, his voice raw. I did not answer with words. I rose on my toes and pressed my mouth to his. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was all the fear, all the adrenaline, all the weeks of unspoken, simmering tension crashing together in a single, desperate moment. His other hand came up instantly, burying itself in my hair at the nape of my neck, tilting my head, deepening the kiss. It was hungry, almost violent. The kiss of a drowning man finally taking air. His tuxedo jacket was rough silk under my hands. I fumbled with it, needing to be closer. He broke the kiss, his breath ragged, and shrugged it off. It slid from his broad shoulders. And I took it, folding it with an absurd domestic neatness, and placed it on a polished wooden bench. When I turned back, his eyes were black with a need that mirrored my own. He did not grab me. He stepped into my space, his large hands coming up to frame my face, his thumbs stroking my cheekbones. "Sydney," he whispered, like a prayer or a curse. This time, the kiss was different. It was slow. It was exploration. His lips moved over mine, learning my shape, questioning, and I answered. My hands slid up his starched shirt, feeling the hard, warm muscle of his chest beneath, my fingers finding the line of his collarbone. He backed me up, one deliberate step at a time, until my back pressed against the warm, wooden paneling of the gallery wall. The texture was a grounding sensation in the middle of the spinning chaos. His body was a wall of heat in front of me, pinning me with his presence but not his weight. His mouth left mine, trailing a line of fire along my jaw, to the exquisitely sensitive spot just below my ear. I arched my neck, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps, my fingers tangling in the thick hair at his temples. "Stop," he murmured against my skin, his voice thick and strained. It was a real question, a final check-in. "Don't," I breathed out, the word barely a sound. His mouth returned to mine, urgent and deep, a silent conversation of shared risk and escalating promise. We stayed there, poised right on the edge, the private line that we would not cross. It was not about a final act. It was about the heat, the pressure, the desperate, shared acknowledgement. It was about the promise of safety I had found in the most dangerous man I had ever known. I was breathless when we finally pulled apart, just enough to breathe. My forehead rested against his. I let out a shaky, hysterical laugh. "I might regret this tomorrow," I whispered. The reality of what we were, who we were, rushing back in. Rafaela tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his touch still impossibly gentle. "Tomorrow," he whispered back, his voice rough. "We live." He took a step back, giving me air. He retrieved his jacket from the bench, his movements already composed, settling it back onto his shoulders as if nothing had happened. He adjusted his cufflinks. I smoothed the satin of my dress, though my hands were still shaking. When Raffaele Conti opened the heavy oak door, the masks were back in place. He was the Dock King. I was his date. But as we stepped back into the glittering light of the gala, a new, unspoken alliance had just been signed. Not in ink, but in sweat and absolute, terrifying trust. The photograph of Raffaele and me at the museum, his hand on my back, was a tactical asset. It surfaced first, as he had known it would, in the internal memos of the Harrow Port Shoreline Commission. The mole we had been hunting, Senator Halcombe's political appointee, passed the image to Ari Sable's network within 12 hours. In the digital back rooms of Meridian, they treated it as a victory. They saw the picture and they saw a liability. Rafael Conte, the untouchable Dock King, had a weakness, a distraction, a waitress. They thought I was the leverage they had been looking for. Raffaele let them think it. While they were busy forwarding the image, he was busy leaking a document of his own. It was a ghost, a beautifully fabricated contract for a massive, new Greenport infrastructure deal. It was designed to look like a legitimate, urgent capital transfer, a sudden move to clean his assets. Ari Sable, blinded by arrogance and the pressure from his own offshore partners, took the bait. He needed to wash his own influx of digital cash before Kellendor's Project Cinder, the investigation Sable thought he controlled, got too close to his actual operations. The fake contract forced his hand, spooking him into moving his timeline. He redirected his next major physical cash out, his pure shipment from Crown Rock, to a single, supposedly secure bottleneck warehouse 39. My part of the new plan was to be painfully, dangerously normal. I went back to the Anchor and Ash Diner. I punched my time card just before 6, the familiar chime of the bell over the door settling my nerves. I tied my apron, the scent of stale coffee and hot grease wrapping around me like a costume. The normalcy was the most difficult acting I had ever done. After the satin dress and the high-tech surveillance, serving bottomless coffee to truckers felt surreal. He was there. Trey Mullen was sitting in the last booth, the one by the jukebox. His broken wrist was in a cheap, black canvas brace. He watched me in the chrome reflection of the napkin dispenser as I worked the counter. He didn't look angry anymore. He just looked worn down, calculating. I walked over, coffee pot in hand. "You are not supposed to be here," I said, my voice low. He slid a glass of water toward me. "On me, Sid." I ignored it. "You picked the wrong side," he said, his voice a low rasp. "You should have just kept your head down. Conte is going down. Halcom and Dorr. They are squeezing him from all sides. He is finished." "You are the one in a brace." "Trey," I countered, filling a mug for the man next to him. "You look like hell. I hear Ari Sable does not pay well for failure. What happens when that Crown Rock money finally dries up?" I hit a nerve. His eyes flashed, the old, impulsive anger mixing with a new, desperate fear. "The money is not drying up," he sneered, leaning in. "The faucet just got turned all the way on. The green light is active. The pure container is moving tonight. Sable is clearing the entire board." Bingo. Pure container. Tonight. An hour later, my secure phone buzzed in my apron. A text from Raphael. It was a link to a local news feed. I clicked it, turning to watch the small television mounted above the diner's counter. Project Cinder was in motion. The screen showed Kellen Dorr, looking stern and official in a blue MOCB windbreaker. He was directing a high-profile raid, tactical teams, battering rams, flashing lights. They were hitting 3 derelict warehouses in the old meatpacking district, on the complete opposite side of town from the docks. It was a spectacular, televised failure, a performance. Dorr was on camera, speaking gravely about fluid intelligence and near misses. He was providing the perfect distraction, using his own task force to give Ari Sable's real shipment all the cover it needed. He had just confirmed himself as the head of the rot. I finished my shift, my hands shaking as I counted out my tips. The car, a different one this time, was waiting. I went to the Kite District, to the 27th floor. Nova was not in the apartment. She was in the building's private, high-security play area, a school for the children of the protected. I went to pick her up. She ran to me, her face lit up, holding out her wrist. Mommy, look, I got a present." It was a cheap, pink plastic watch, molded in the shape of a cartoon cat, its eyes wide and vacant. "A new mailman gave it to the lady at the front desk," she said, beaming. "He said it was a special delivery, just for me." My blood did not just run cold, it stopped. We did not have a mailman, not here, not to this floor. Packages were screened, x-rayed, and held at a central facility. I looked at the guard by the elevator, one of Raphael's men. His face was chalk white. He had allowed an unscreened package through, charmed by a man in a uniform. My hands trembled as I took the watch from her. "It is so pretty, sweetie," I said, my voice a strained whisper. I turned it over. In the center of the cat's smiling, plastic face, in what was supposed to be its nose, was a tiny, perfectly round pinprick hole. A lens. I almost dropped it. I ripped it off her wrist, my breath catching in a dry sob. They had found her. They had bypassed the 27th floor, the guards, the biometrics. They had put a camera on my child. I stumbled back into the hallway, my back hitting the wall, the plastic watch crushing in my hand. I was suffocating. I was failing her. The elevator chimed, the doors opened. It was Rafaela. He had been coming to see me. He stepped out and froze, taking in the scene in one devastating glance. My face crumbling, the pink plastic in my fist, Nova standing in the doorway. Her face crumpled in confusion, sensing my terror. The iron control he always wore did not just crack, it evaporated. The cold fury I had seen before was a pale imitation of the volcanic, silent rage that now transformed his features. He did not speak to the guard. He did not look at the watch. He came straight to me. He saw I was shaking, unable to breathe. He put his hands on my shoulders, then pulled me into him, hard. His arms wrapped around me, one hand coming up to cup the back of my head, pressing my face against the solid wall of his chest. He was not just holding me. He was holding me together. He put a camera on my baby, I whispered, the words muffled against his shirt. He just held me, his own body rigid, absorbing my tremors. After a long minute, he set me back, his hands firm on my shoulders, forcing me to meet his gaze. His eyes were black, all pupil. "This stops," he said, his voice a raw, quiet rasp that was more terrifying than any shout. "Not tomorrow. We end this tonight." We were back in the penthouse. The map was active. "Trey's Pure container is at Warehouse 39, Rafaela said, his voice all cold steel. Dor is using his Cinder task force to hit the wrong targets, providing the perfect cover for Sable's shipment to move. He has to be at the real site to oversee the transfer." "It is a two-pronged plan," I said, my voice empty of tears, filled with a cold, hard clarity. "We do not just stop the container, we take the lawman who protected it." "He's arrogant," Rafaela agreed, "but he is not stupid. He will not be at the warehouse itself. He will be at the rail yard, waiting for the handoff." "The token," I said. "The one he showed me at the museum. He's proud of it. I can get him to bring it." I looked at the map. "The Flint Creek rail yard. It's abandoned. It's halfway between the docks and downtown. I will tell him I have something for him, something I took from Trey. He will not be able to resist." Rafaela nodded, his mind already moving. "My dock team, the Lucia Fund security, will hit the warehouse. You lure Dor to the rail yard. My men will be in the shadows." "No," I said. He stopped, turning to me. "One last condition. The Kite District is compromised. That guard is gone. Nova moves, now, not to another apartment. I want her somewhere they cannot touch, somewhere they do not even know exists." He did not hesitate. "Sunset Base, a deconsecrated church in the old town. Steel doors, underground levels. It is run by the fund. It is clean." "Take her there now," I commanded. "And she stays. I do not care what happens at the rail yard. You do not move her, and I do not contact her until it is completely, finally over. Not until I call you, and I give the all clear." "What is the all clear?" I thought of her drawing, the one she made in the safe house. "I will call, and I will say, 'The seagull flies low.'" The wind at the Flint Creek rail yard didn't just blow. It screamed. It was a high, thin shriek that whipped off the Delance River. Carrying the smell of rust and salt, it tore at my cheap nylon windbreaker, the hood snapping uselessly against my back. Below us, the massive, dark mouth of Warehouse 39 was open, floodlights cutting cones of white into the darkness, illuminating the Pure container. The rail yard was on a bluff overlooking the docks, and the gantry stairs I was climbing offered a perfect vantage point. The steel mesh steps were slick with rain and river spray, vibrating under my feet. "This had better be worth it, Lopez," Kellen Dor growled from behind me. He was breathing heavily, his expensive suit not designed for climbing. "He said to meet here." I lied, my voice trembling for effect. "He said he'd give me the drive back if I paid him. Trey, He said he didn't want to get in deeper. He's a fool, Dor spat, following me onto the main gantry platform. We were 50 feet up, exposed, the wind tearing at us. I had a tiny, flesh-colored earpiece. Raphael's voice was a calm, steady presence in my ear. Now, Sydney, give the signal. I turned, as if shielding my face from the wind, and brought my hand to my mouth. I pressed the mic hidden in my sleeve. He's not here, I said, a fake panic. The seagull flies low. I repeat, the seagull flies low. It was the go command, miles away, at Sunset Base. Nova was asleep, secure, across the water. Raphael's clean port team, his legitimate Lucia Fund security, cut the main power grid to the warehouse district, plunging the entire shoreline into a deep, sudden blackness. The only lights left were the battery-powered ones inside Warehouse 39. "What is this?" Dor snapped, fumbling for his phone. A slow, steady clapping echoed from the shadows of the crane machinery behind us. "What a performance!" A smooth voice called out. Ari Sable stepped into the dim emergency light of the gantry. He was wearing a black turtleneck, just as Rafaela had described, his smile a thin, bloodless line. Bravo, Sydney, truly, the scared little waitress, caught in the middle. It was almost believable. My heart stopped. This was not the plan. Sable wasn't supposed to be here. "Ari," Dor said, his voice instantly changing from bully to subordinate, "the container is moving. What are you doing up here?" "I'm closing a loop," Sable said, his eyes never leaving me. I felt a sharp, cold point press into my side. Just above my hip, a hand grabbed my arm, yanking me back. "End of the line. Waitress." Trey Mullen whispered in my ear. He was behind me, his face pale and sweating in the gloom, the blade of his switchblade digging into my side. "You should have just kept serving coffee." "Let her go, Ari," a new voice commanded. Rafaela. He emerged from the opposite end of the gantry, not from the stairs, but from the crane cab itself. He was alone, flanked only by shadows. Sable laughed. "The Dock King. Come to save your new pet. You are outmanned. Conta, Dor, arrest him." Dor drew his weapon, but he looked confused, his eyes darting between Sable and Rafaela. "Not so fast," Rafaela said. He raised his left hand. In it, he was holding a small, silver object, the cold storage wallet, the original ledger. "This is what you really want, isn't it? Ari, the one she took from the diner? The one that ties you not just to Dor, but to Crown Rock and the Senator." Sable's smile faltered. "A copy." "The original," Rafaela corrected him, "and I will trade it for her and for her daughter." Sable laughed again, a dry, humorless sound. "You'd trade an empire for a waitress. You are sentimental and stupid. You see, I already have your leverage." He pulled a tablet from his coat. The screen lit up, showing a live video feed. It was a dark room, a small bed, Nova. She was sleeping, Barnaby the rabbit clutched in her arms. My knees buckled. A raw, guttural sound tore from my throat. "No." "She looks so peaceful at the Kite District safe house," Sable mused. "My men are very quiet. One word from me, and they go inside." Trey's knife dug deeper. "Drop the drive, Conte," he hissed. But Rafaela was watching me, not the screen. His eyes were calm. "Look closer, Sydney," he said, his voice even. "Look at the timestamp." I forced my eyes back to the screen. The digital clock in the corner of the feed read 23:40:16, but it was frozen. It was not a live feed. It was a loop, a video, not a window. The pink watch was a lovely touch. "Ari," Rafaela said, his voice dripping with contempt. "A gift. It let you find the Kite District. It let you see the seagull beacon I let you find. But you never found the real one, the one in her hair." Sable's face changed, the mask of confidence cracking. "While your men have been admiring a video loop for the past 3 hours," Raphael continued, "Nova was moved to a place that is not on any map, Sunset Base." "Liar," Sable snarled. "Kellen," Rafaela said, turning his cold gaze to the MOCB agent, "your token, the one you are so proud of, Use it. Call your team. Shut me down." Dorr, his face pale, grabbed the token from his belt. He pressed the button. Nothing. He pressed it again. Panic rising in his eyes. "It's dead. The network is down." "It is not dead," Rafaela said. "It is just no longer yours. When Sydney got close to you at the museum, my team cloned its signal. And for the past 48 hours, every packet of data, every encrypted login, every secure communication you have sent has been simultaneously routed and decrypted. Not to me, to the district attorney, the real one, the one in Northmere." Trey's hand wavered. The knife point eased its pressure for just 1 second. It was all I needed. I did not think. I moved. I grabbed his wrist with my free hand, the one he wasn't holding. I slammed my palm against his elbow, hyperextending it in the wrong direction, and twisted his wrist inward, just as Raphael had shown me. I broke his grip. The joint popped. The knife clattered onto the metal walkway. Trey screamed, stumbling back. I turned to him, my voice a cold, ragged whisper. "You had another choice, Trey. You always had another choice." "Now," Raffaele roared. It was not covering fire. It was light, a blinding, deafening explosion of it. Massive floodlights from the gantries above us, from the rooftops across the water, all lit at once, turning the night-black rail yard into a white, artificial day. "Sirens, not MOCB, not local PD." Men were swarming up the stairs, wearing the dark blue windbreakers of the Harrow Port Shoreline Commission, the real one. But they were not being led by a bureaucrat. They were being led by the Northmere District Attorney himself, holding a warrant. "It's a trap," Sable shrieked. He shoved Dorr toward the officers and ran, not for the stairs, but for the edge of the gantry, toward a dark container ship docked below. Rafaela did not chase him. He ran to me. He grabbed my hand as the first officers crested the platform, shouting, "Kellen Dorr, you are under arrest." Sable was on the deck of the ship, cutting its mooring lines. "He's getting away," I yelled. "He can have the water," Rafaela shouted, pulling me toward the gantry's edge. "I am keeping you." Behind us, a deafening whoosh. The pure container on the dock below, the one the DA's team was moving to secure, exploded. Sable must have rigged it. It was a diversion. A wave of flame and heat washed over the gantry. Rafaela shoved me behind a steel support. "We have to jump," he yelled over the roar. He dragged me to the railing. The water was 50 feet below, a churning black void. "Trust me." We climbed the railing and jumped. Together, we hit the cold. Shocking water as the fire on the quay ignited something else, a fuel line, a gas main. I did not know. The entire dockside of Warehouse 39 erupted in a massive rolling fireball, a brutal, beautiful, false dawn that lit up the sky in red and orange as we sank into the cold. Silent dark, the morning after the explosion. I woke up at Sunset Base. I was wrapped in a dry blanket, smelling of river water and smoke. Rafaela was gone, but one of his men was waiting. The first thing I did was see Nova. She was fast asleep in a small, clean room, her seagull pin on the nightstand. Only then did I allow myself to breathe. The local news was an explosion of its own. The Harrow Port Gazette's front page was a grainy photo of the fire at Warehouse 39. But the real story was the text. The MOCB's Project Cinder was officially suspended, pending an internal investigation. Kellen Dorr was in state custody, his name and photo plastered everywhere. The Northmere District Attorney had held a pre-dawn press conference, detailing a long-term investigation into corruption, funded by an offshore entity named Sable Meridian. They had Dorr's cloned token logs, a treasure trove of incriminating data, including crypto transactions from Meridian-flagged accounts. The DA had played his hand perfectly. Rafaela had given him the knife, and he had used it to gut the entire corrupt operation. 2 days later, I was in a sterile interrogation room, on the other side of a two-way mirror. Trey Mullen was on the inside, in an orange jumpsuit, his braced arm resting on the metal table. He looked small, broken, and impossibly young. He had taken the deal. in exchange for full immunity and entrance into the witness protection program. He was giving them everything. He was testifying against Ari Sable, who was still at large but now the most wanted man on the East Coast. I watched him sign the papers, his good hand shaking. The DA looked at me through the glass, a question in his eyes. I just nodded. The chapter of my life, the one of weakness and rent money and betrayal, was finally, quietly closed. Miss Lopez, the district attorney, a sharp man named Pierce, said to me afterward in the hallway, Trey's testimony is excellent, but yours is the linchpin. It connects Door to Sable, and Sable to the physical attack at the diner. You are the key. We are formally offering you and your daughter full relocation and protection under the National Witness Security Division. It was the out I had begged for, a new life, new names, a quiet town somewhere in the Midwest. I would be safe. Nova would be safe. I looked over at Raphael, who was standing at the end of the hall, near the elevator, his face an impassive mask. He had been silent throughout the meeting, a dark, powerful shadow at the edges of the law. He heard the offer. He watched me, his steel-gray eyes giving nothing away. He was accepting it. He was willing to let me disappear, to lose the one person who knew the truth, just to guarantee Nova's safety. He was letting me go. That evening, I went to Casa Vetro. The penthouse was quiet, the view of the city glittering and indifferent. Rafaela was standing by the window. He did not turn when I entered. You should take the deal, Sydney, he said, his voice quiet, rough. Pierce can protect you. It is a clean life, the one you deserve. I walked up to him, stopping just behind his shoulder. I could smell the faint scent of bergamot and wool. And what about you? I will manage, he said. That is not what I asked. I moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to look at me. You set this all up. You gave the DA the data. You could have taken Sable out yourself. You could have just won. But you did this. You used the law. It was the only way to guarantee the win was permanent, he said. And now you are just letting me walk away, I stated. Nova's safety is the only thing that matters, and he countered, his jaw tight. I looked at this powerful, broken man who had built an empire to protect himself from loss, and I saw him preparing for the biggest loss of all. You can win without owning, Rafaela, I whispered. He flinched, as if I had struck him. His eyes closed for a brief second. When they opened, the steel was gone, replaced by a raw, aching vulnerability. And you can love, he replied, his voice hoarse, without being caged. He turned from me and walked to his desk. He picked up a thick leather-bound folio and handed it to me. I was going to give this to you, regardless of your choice. I opened it. It was a stack of legal documents, corporate filings, asset transfers, shareholder agreements. I do not understand. It is the transfer, he said. The final 30% of the Greenport shares, they are being moved from Conte Holdings to the Lucia Conte Charitable Fund. The process started 3 days ago. He pointed to another page. This is a binding commitment, filed with the state, a 12 to 18-month timeline to liquidate all gray assets. And this, he tapped the last page, is an oversight clause. I have granted full, independent auditing power to the Private Maritime Council. They will hold me to the fire. He was showing me, not just telling me, when he was giving me proof. He was making good on his promise, 100%. I closed the folio, my heart hammering. Rafaela, I said, my voice thick, the night at the museum, in the gallery. It was not an accident, it was not adrenaline. I knew what I was doing. I chose you. He looked at me, his breath catching. I am not taking the deal, I said. I am not going into witness protection. I am not running. Sydney, he started, taking a step toward me, a storm of hope and fear in his eyes. But I am not staying here either. I cut him off. Not in this penthouse. Not in your world. I am going back to my apartment. I am enrolling in nursing school for the spring semester. I will have classes. I will have clinicals. I will have night shifts. I am going to have a life. Rafaele, a normal one. And I cannot do that if I am surrounded by men in dark suits. I cannot do that if I am living in a gilded cage, even for my own safety." He stood there, processing my terms, the king, being given an ultimatum by the waitress. "I can," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "I can give you that. Invisible protection, a driver you never see who just changes your route, a spot for Nova in the Lucia Fund's internal daycare, the best in the state. While you are in class, a full scholarship for your schooling. I will not be in your classes. I will not be at your job. If you want me to stand at the fence line, Sydney, I will stand there, and I will not take one step over." It was everything. It was freedom, and it was safety. It was a promise, not of ownership, but of support. I stepped closer to him, closing the last bit of distance between us. I raised my hand, not to his face, not to his arm, but laid it flat against his chest. I felt his heart, a strong, steady beat beneath my palm. "One last condition," I said, looking up into his eyes. "When this trial is over, when Sable is sentenced, when it is done, the DA will want your testimony. I want you to give it, not as a shadow, not as a confidential informant in a file. I want you to walk into that courthouse as a citizen, as Raffaele Conte, and I want you to stand in the light." His hand came up and covered mine, pressing it tighter against his chest. I felt him nod, a single, slow, binding motion. "I will," he said. The tears I had been holding back finally came. I sagged against him, my face burying in his shirt. His arms came around me, pulling me in, holding me so tightly I felt like my broken pieces were finally being slotted back into place. This embrace was not like the one in the hallway, born of terror. It was not like the one in the museum, born of fire and need. This one was different. It did not smell of gunpowder or adrenaline. It smelled of clean wool, and faintly, of the basil soup he had made in the safe house. It smelled like home. The trial opened on a Tuesday. Ari Sable, who had been apprehended by federal marshals in a failed attempt to flee to Crown Rock, sat behind the defense table looking immaculate, as if he were attending an auction, not a federal trial. His lawyers were slick. They tried to paint me as a scorned woman, a co-conspirator with Raffaele Conte in a complex market takeover. Their centerpiece of evidence was a cleverly edited audio clip of my frantic call from the diner, juxtaposed with the time-stamped, looped video of Nova sleeping safely in the Kite District safe house. She was never in danger. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sable's lawyer argued, his voice smooth, "the entire threat was fabricated, orchestrated by Miss Lopez and her lover, Raffaele Conte, to frame my client." The jury looked confused. My heart hammered. The Northmere district attorney stood. "The defense is correct about one thing," he said, his voice cutting through the room. "The video is of the child, but it is a loop, and it was taken before the threat escalated." He held up a small, clear evidence bag. "This," he said, "is the pink cat watch, the decoy, the one Miss Lopez found." He then held up a second, identical bag. Inside it, the small silver seagull barrette gleamed under the courtroom lights. "And this is the real beacon, the one the defendant knew nothing about. We have the telemetry data, federally time-stamped. It shows that, in response to the camera being found, Miss Lopez and Mr. Conte moved the child to a second, undisclosed location, Sunset Base, hours before the events at Warehouse 39. The video is a fraud. The threat was real." The seagull pin, the gift that had been a tracker, it had saved me. The verdict was a foregone conclusion, but before sentencing, the real National Witness Security Division, the NWSD, approached me. "Sable is finished," the lead agent said, "but he still has money, and money means assets. We want to move you and your daughter to a federal holding facility until he is formally sentenced." I hated it, but I agreed. It was the last step. They put us in a black government sedan, a 3-car convoy. I held Nova's hand, her small form buckled in tightly beside me. We drove through the city, the midday traffic heavy. We were on the Halcyon Bridge, the main artery over the Delance. It happened without warning. A massive 18-wheel dump truck, black and bearing no license plates, roared out of an access lane. It didn't brake. It slammed its full weight into the lead car of our convoy, sending it spinning into the concrete divider. My driver cursed, hitting the brakes, but the truck kept coming, scraping along the side of the bridge, a deafening shriek of metal on metal. It slammed into us, pinning our car against the guardrail. The truck's engine roared as it pushed, trying to shove us. The entire sedan, over the edge and into the river 50 feet below. Nova screamed. The agent in the passenger seat was yelling into his radio, but I could hear nothing over the sound of our car being crushed. Then, a cascade of orange sparks rained down onto our windshield. I looked up, through the glass, past the bulk of the truck, high above us on the bridge's massive arch steel superstructure. A figure was harnessed to the maintenance gantry. He was dressed in black work gear. Rafaela. He was not in a car. He was not part of a counter ambush. He was alone, and he was holding an industrial cutting torch. The blue-white flame was slicing through a massive galvanized steel lock and chain that appeared to anchor the truck's cab to its chassis. The driver of the truck, feeling the vibration, must have realized what was happening. He slammed on his brakes, trying to disengage, but Rafaela was faster. The lock severed, with a grotesque, metallic scream. The truck's cab stopped, but the massive, heavy-laden bed did not. It jackknifed, its own momentum tearing it free. The entire back half of the truck tipped, collapsing onto its side, a mountain of steel that completely blocked the bridge, a perfect, impassable barrier. The attack was over. Our car door was jammed. The agent kicked it open. I scrambled out, dragging Nova with me. Sirens were closing in from both ends of the bridge now. The air smelled of burnt ozone and the cold, wet river. I saw him. Rafaela was descending from the gantry, unhooking his safety line. I ran to him, ignoring the shouting agents. I ran to him in the middle of the bridge, the red and blue lights painting his face. "You are on the old line," I shouted at him, my voice cracking, meaning the line, the border of the law he always walked. He gripped my arms, his face intense, the torch still hot at his belt. "No, Sydney," he said, his voice rough and clear over the sirens. "Today, I stand with the law." The police swarmed us, on the ground, hands in the air. Rafaela did not move. He just raised his hands, empty, open. The Northmere DA pushed through the wall of uniforms. "He is with me," the DA commanded. Rafaela looked at the DA, then at me. "It is done." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted drive. My digitally signed contact logs for this operation, as promised. Mr. Pierce. He had done it. He had stood on the Halcyon Bridge, the escape route of his old life, and he had chosen to stand in the light. The sentencing was quick. Ari Sable received multiple, consecutive life sentences. Kellen Dorr, facing irrefutable evidence, took a plea deal, and Trey Mullen, in a moment of quiet justice, was remanded to the Lucia Conti Charitable Fund's new maritime rehabilitation program. A second chance, a way to work the clean docks. My life began. I went back to the Anchor and Ash, but my name was on the door now, as shift manager. I enrolled in the fall nursing program. My nights filled with textbooks. Nova started first grade at the school in the Kite District, and in the afternoons, I would watch her from my apartment window, playing soccer on the secure rooftop park, her laughter like wind chimes. Leeward Point was quiet. Conti Holdings completed its transformation. The Dock King was now, officially, a port infrastructure contractor. One night, late, there was a knock on my apartment door. Not a pound, just a soft, polite knock. I opened it. Rafaela stood in the hallway. He was alone. No guards, no centurion. He wore a dark wool coat, and he looked, for the first time, like a man, not a king. He seemed almost nervous. "Sydney," he said, his voice quiet, May I please come into your life as a normal man?" I did not speak. I just reached out, took his hand, and pulled him inside. I pulled him past the small entryway and into my kitchen. I kicked the door shut behind him. I took his large, scarred hand and pressed it flat against my own chest, right over my heart, letting him feel its steady, frantic rhythm. "This," I whispered, "is where you live." The kiss was slow and deep, with no museum walls to hide us and no fear to fuel us. It was a promise. I took his heavy coat from his shoulders and hung it on the hook by the door. His fingers found mine, and they laced together, a perfect fit. A little while later, a tiny sound made us break apart. Nova was standing in the hallway, clutching Barnaby the rabbit, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Rafaela, who'd been standing with his arms securely around my waist, immediately let go, stepping back, giving her space. He looked at her, and the corners of his eyes crinkled. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile, and gave her a small wave. "Hello, Nova." This, I thought, as he turned to the sink to get her a glass of water, this is how a family really starts. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, respectful step into the light. The knot was untied, the new port infrastructure broke ground. I passed my first clinical exams. Nova learned to draw seagulls that were flying toward the shore, not away. Months later, I was volunteering a late shift at St. Adela Community. A woman was brought in, a fall at the docks. The young nurse at the intake desk looked up, her pen hovering. "We need a contact," she said, her voice tired. "Who should we call?" As the woman answered, I smiled, remembering that first night, the rain, the blood. If she had asked me that question tonight, I would have finally had an answer. I would have whispered, "Call my man, the port contractor, and my daughter's godfather." As for that other name, the one they used to call him, everyone in Leeward Point still knew it, but no one ever needed to say it again. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below and let me know where in the world you are, and share your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories. Give this video a like and hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.